Hello, welcome back to Meraki Unboxed. My name's Simon Thompson, your host of the show, and it's awesome to have you with us once again. Meraki Unboxed is a podcast we run every couple of weeks. Every other Wednesday, we publish a new episode, and we focus it on all kinds of different topics: technology, people at Meraki, the external partners, vendors, and customers that we work with. And so we try to bring a nice variety of content to you with our over 60 episodes we've got in the bag now. So do go back and have a look at that archive if you haven't had a chance to catch up yet. There's some really good stuff in there. And in fact, the session that we're doing today is a continuation of a series of podcast episodes where we're focusing around experiences. And this has been a really important word for us at Meraki in 2021, where we're really trying to just change the conversation from thinking too much about the bits and the bytes and the individual pieces of technology, but really what you can do with it and how you can change experiences for people. That's really what we're here to do in the world of technology. So we're really excited to be talking about that again today. Before I get into the detail, just want to remind you that having guests on the show and having new ideas is what keeps this podcast fresh and keeps our big audience coming back time and time again. So if you do have some ideas that you'd like to share, if you'd like to be on the podcast, love to hear from you. And do reach out to me. Use Twitter, and you can find my handle there is @MerakiSimon. Ping me a message. I would love to hear from you and get you involved in this podcast. Okay, so let's get into today's episode. And as I said, this is the second in our series around experiences. We did one just a couple of episodes ago, so do go back and check that out if you'd like to hear more on this topic. But let's get our guests introduced so we can get into today's conversation. First of all, we have Bernhard Mail, who's joining us from Kisi. Good morning, Bernhard.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you with us. I'm really excited to hear your story. We're going to get into that really shortly. And then joining us from Meraki, we have the veritable Jordan Noonan. Hey, Jordan.
Veritable. I love that intro. Thanks, Simon. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you here as well. And tell us what you do at Meraki, Jordan.
Yeah, so I've been at Meraki for a long time in a variety of roles. As of late, I'm an evangelist. So I'm like you, Simon. I am all about understanding how to position Meraki to help our customers solve problems.
That's what we're all about here. So we're going to get into the conversation now. And Bernhard, I also really would love to hear your background, and maybe that's a good place for us to kick off as well. Just tell us what you do, what Kisi is all about, and then we'll get into a conversation around the whole sort of workforce experiences and what you're doing.
Sure thing. In my role as a CEO at Kisi, I do a lot of things all day, mainly thinking about where in the future we need to grow and how we can serve users' needs better. And we started this company, I started a company with two of my friends from school. And the reason why we did that and we got the idea to start Kisi is because we all didn't have access to our offices in companies where we worked at before. So the ignition of this idea to start a cloud-based access control company, that's probably the category keyword that you would use, really came from a bad user experience in that we had ourselves. And that's how we came to be Kisi, and now we're here today.
I love hearing those kind of entrepreneurial stories around how the idea gets seeded, and it's quite often about a real world challenge that you sort of stumble across and realize that you want to do something about it. So that's really interesting. Jordan, do you want to just paint a broad picture and get us into the conversation around this sort of experiences concept and how we want to think about that?
Yeah, certainly. I think the important thing, and this will come as a shock to zero people listening to this, expectations at work have changed in a variety of realms. The big one we're seeing is where work is taking place has dramatically shifted. In the past, it was more of a binary situation where you had, your workers in the office and you had your workers working from home, potentially a small subset of those workers. And now that whole demographic has just been completely upended, and there's a whole gradient of options and configurations that customers are needing to embody, and they need to embody them quickly in order to serve those employees and those workers. So really in the lens of experiences, the experiences that we want to enable for customers is that remote work experience. So if you have a group of really distributed, disparate workers out there, you need to enable them. And then probably more in focus to most organizations is the idea of hybrid work, or that gradient of options that customers have when it comes to working at home, working in the office, having a split, coming in. And then this is where I'd love to get into it with you, Bernhard, is what are the opportunities and the areas that we need to reinvest in order to meet that growing need. And in the case of access control, how do we provide desks and areas for people to work that are variable to meet kind of that dynamic shift in the market? So
yeah, and I think before the pandemic, access control has been pretty nerdy, and people were really motivated replacing their keys and their cards with a mobile credential, and that's what we've done really well. But with the pandemic, it looks like we're starting to think about a workplace in a very different way, and you need to use your spaces more efficiently and with different purpose maybe. And that's how IT kind of often becomes the driver of new facility initiatives that are infrastructure driven. And that's what you mentioned as well, with like resources that are meeting rooms or desks, or like infrastructure is access control, but could as well be video surveillance or any other sensors that you want to use. And so those two worlds basically interconnect on the user side and the infrastructure side, and becomes an experience that IT typically sets up and automates. And what we've seen as a big trend when you think about the data that they've been handling is that they're not so interested in like locking down facilities and saying, hey, over 200 users, we don't let anyone in anymore. They're very interested in like behind the scenes getting the data and like maybe alerting that you can understand capacity, that you can understand occupancy, and like what is busy, which days are busy, which hours are rush hours in the office or in facilities, and kind of react basically from there and build different types of opportunities for end users to use those facilities. And I think that's kind of how we see the dynamic shifting a little bit also on the security paradigm, that it's not about who do you keep out, it's more like how do you enable the best experience for people who are motivated to come to the facility and want to be productive and collaborate. And that's kind of how they use the data to influence those kind of workflows.
It's kind of ironic that before this dynamic change in the workforce happened, and there's always kind of this creep towards IoT adoption. And I find it very interesting that as people have left the HQ more and more, there's been a greater need to get insight into like what's actually going on there, so that you can enable, like you said, that collaboration, those individuals that might be spending 2 or 3 days at home, but also then need to be able to come into a physical space to collaborate or get project work done.
Yeah, and what has been also interesting on that note is that IoT in the past has been a really problematic word for a lot of people, because they read about IoT hacks all the time. But now it's really at a place where you have to use IoT, otherwise your space can't survive. Like you cannot be remotely in control of what's going on a facility and stay compliant and react the way you need to react if you don't use IoT. It's not nice to have anymore, and like must have. And that also changed the way companies purchase these types of devices and infrastructure, and they're now much more sophisticated and are able to buy them without having to fear of getting hacked. And that's kind of a huge change in the market, that they're just ready to adopt those things.
I have a question, actually. I think I would love to know a little bit more about the solutions that you've initially started to focus on as you grew out this business, Bernhard. So, I mean, could you just paint a picture for us and just give us a sense of some examples, perhaps, of what kind of experiences you're impacting with your technology?
Yes, so I think maybe the best one to start with is with our first customer. So when we started, maybe about 8 years ago, we launched Kisi at a startup event, and the first company who came to us at that time, who said, I really need this because I have problems people getting in the building and in my space, and they always complain and never have access, was a co-working space at that time. And funny enough, that at like 8 years ago, that was maybe 1 out of 3 co-working spaces in Manhattan. And so that was probably the earliest form of hyper dynamic workplace. And it just grew from there with the cloud enablement of collaboration tools and anything like that, and work from anywhere kind of styles that employers tolerate. And so mobile credential kind of enables remote on and offboarding. So as a end user, you can book a space for a day or for buy a membership for a month, and then you automatically, after paying for that membership, you get access for that location for a day or month or however you booked it, long you booked it for. And that's kind of how the shared workspace model works. And now other companies are doing similar things, which is why we're really good at it. But obviously, they don't charge the employees to come to work. But that has been the core workflow we've been building on top of, and now more recently, we are building it more into a platform where you can also share visitor passes with someone, where you can not have everyone, all employees, always have access to the location, but only the ones who are booking a location, and with like it becomes a lot more complicated and with many more admins involved. And I think that's why we have been adding to the platform and morphing it into more like a access control or a physical security platform with many different solutions that you can build.
No, that's super interesting. At one end of the spectrum, I'm imagining like what you just said, the shared workspace where that's the actual business model. And then on the other end, it's like I'm an organization that wants to enable 30, 40, 50% of my workforce to be able to come in 2 out of the 5 days a week. How do I enable that in a safe and scalable way? And it sounds like Kisi is one of those potential options that will allow you to kind of bring those collaborative spaces back into being.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the typical IT team, maybe it's one IT person on every 100 employees. And so typically, you don't have IT staff in every location, and so a lot of them use our data to predictively forecast real estate needs now, and real estate teams ask the IT teams now, what do you think? What's the occupancy? How fast has it been growing, the usage? Do people like to go to that location? They've never been there because they work centrally and manage 20 different offices in nationwide. And so those information pieces really become valuable to a lot of teams outside of IT that plan the future of the space as well. And I think that's really interesting.
One of the areas that we chatted about before we hit the record button, Bernhard, was around this sort of change in the workplace where facilities and IT, the roles are sort of merging together over time. Do you want to just share some of that, your own experiences of that, and how you've found your technology changing some of the experiences that are happening within the organization itself? Specifically thinking about facilities and IT.
Yeah. So traditionally, if you think about specifically access control systems, they've been purchased by facility teams by simply contracting an outside vendor, not even knowing what brands they have, but the vendor seems reputable and like allowing them to install whatever they are carrying. Now that they're responsible about those infrastructures is moving more to IT, and IT has an extreme high interest to understand what they're actually installing. What brand is this? How is the support? How's the experience for the end user? What can we do with it? And it's not only security and like ease of use and management. It's also about scalability and making sure that they actually can integrate it with other workflows. So, for example, when IT provisions an identity for a new employee, that employee should probably be in a group in your identity provider where they get automatically access control for that location as well. And so with automating those things, the facility team actually has more time making sure the facility is in good shape rather than doing a lot of manual overhead tasks. And everyone loves that. And I think in the end, it brings IT and facilities closer together. If you have an easy user interface for facilities to use on a day-to-day basis, the IT can do all the setup and behind the scenes kind of automation and reporting based on the same tool and data set. That really enables teams to collaborate using facility tools a lot more, and that's really different than just a couple of years ago.
Have you actually had to build sort of special bespoke interfaces for facilities teams for the data? Because sometimes there's more presented in an IT platform than a facilities person might need, and I know that's something we've considered with our new Vision. What's it called, Jordan? What's the name of it? The Vision portal, I think it's called.
Vision
Something.
portal.
Yeah,
the
that's
Vision.
the one.
We've always had different roles. So a typical use case, for example, is that IT, so maybe a systems engineer has like an infrastructure role and can configure the hardware and control the hardware and make changes to it, but for example, can't necessarily share access. Only administrator can share access. And facilities, for example, could be allowed to either, like if it's really for example, an office manager level, to just check, does someone have access, can review recent events. And that's where, for example, an integration we have with Meraki MV camera is that we pull in snapshots or snippets from the video feed and show it alongside the access event. So when the door opens or when there's a door alarm, then you can just go in Kisi and look at the most recent event and see the video snippet right next to it or the pictures. And when you're more interested in it, you click on it and go to the Meraki dashboard. That's really great for like the workplace, because you basically not only give an all-in-one dashboard to people, but also avoid that someone has to sit in front of 24/7 surveillance systems, which you don't want everyone to have access to. And that makes it a lot more employee friendly and privacy friendly, that if you don't need to give all access of data to everyone. And it's funny you bring up the roles, because recently we've had a lot of customers ask about custom roles. And so it's like companies give admin access to people who never had access to such a system before. Like, for example, a marketing team lead now needs to check who was in from the marketing team or anything like that. And that information over time will just be more transparent, like pushing it into Slack or Microsoft Teams or anything communications wise. And just making sure people know who's on site. So if they need anything or they want to come to collaborate, they can.
I think, just to add on to what Bernhard just said, I think that really underscores the importance of interoperability now with kind of these modern use cases that are emerging. And you're going to want to be able to take information from one system and populate it to Slack, like you just pointed out. Zooming out even a little bit further, though, just a point I want to make about just the overall technology platform. You want to think about what that platform is and how easy it is to kind of modularly add on the amazing solutions like Kisi on top of that platform. And at Meraki, we like to think about simplifying that process and making it really transparent and straightforward to go from knowing you need to solve something to actually implementing and solving it quickly and intuitively. And that's where partners like Kisi come in and really help us to take what we can do for customers to the next level. Interoperability is really, really important. It is really the takeaway. Bernhard talked about it in the context of Kisi being able to push messaging out. Zooming out a little bit further, the platform, the technology platform, obviously I'm a Meraki person. So obviously, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, I'm talking about Meraki here. But it's critically important to consider how easy it's going to be for you to partner with organizations like Kisi to solve some of these kind of next-gen, bespoke, really cool, but really at the same time challenging problems that customers are coming up against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so obviously we're now starting to think, and a lot of people are now starting to go back into the workplace. So Bernhard, I'm assuming that this has led to a complete revisiting of what the experience should be like for people who are coming back as we try to go back to the normal or something like the new normal. Tell us what that's been like for you. What kind of conversations are you having with your customers around improving the experience as we get into the new normal?
Yeah, so this has been very interesting in the past 2 years. I think, when COVID started, there were like the short-term effects of like people wanting to require health surveys before you get into the space, and then only conditional approve access control when the questions were, in the right form, like the right answers. But I think that quickly moved away because that gets in the way of making it easy for people to come back to work. And so really, um, companies have been looking at a lot of, convergence of workplace tools, not only for the admin, that they have everything in one, that they can automate using really what we provide is almost physical identity signals. So, we know when someone shows up, we know you can use that data to trigger something else from there. And that's how now companies start to build better experiences for that people really find useful and productive. So you can think of security features when someone unlocks the door that only then you can access certain other things. And or if we know that this is a person who always needs a desk when they come, or always doesn't need a desk because they're in a meeting room all the time, then you can automatically do some booking on behalf of them. And when they unlock the door, they automatically get a desk assigned. Like you can basically build it as a flow of, you know, you're home, you're working from home, then you go into, I don't know, shared ride, and then you go to work and you unlock the door, and then the experience continues from there. So it's more like a flow instead of like a singular product experience. That's really a totally different conversation with companies, often around their own workplace apps, what their vision is, what that they want to merge everything from the different apps into one workplace app that they want to use. And we are happy to be like an SDK for those. Like it's really about what does the end user in the end have to do, and what benefits does the end user have from this whole IoT and cloud and all that stuff. So they want to make it easier and more fun, more productive, more collaborative. And that's kind of the goals now versus in the past that was more admin focused.
Yeah, so very much around just trying to connect experiences together as opposed to them being lots of point solutions. And
Exactly.
that's always been a big problem with the application of technology, is that it's often done to address a specific issue that somebody runs into, but then you create problems elsewhere. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. If I think about going into the workplace, I want to think about the transition from the door, the perimeter, and then into workspaces that are shared with other people, hot desks and meeting rooms. There's all sorts of technology implications for those.
Yeah, and especially when you come from the IT world, Meraki has the amazing Meraki marketplace, or the Meraki ecosystem, and that's normal in IT. It's just not normal that you can now even leverage infrastructure or spaces in that ecosystem, in the same ecosystem as well, and combine it with the other cloud tools that you already use. And I think that's new and sometimes blows people's minds.
We like that. We like to do a bit of that.
Yeah, it's fun to see in calls when people come to us for access control and they realize what they can really do.
Absolutely. So, Jordan, how do we tie this back into, because you obviously you started us off with a great sort of broad conversation around experiences and the progression of those over time.
Sure. I think the takeaway is new areas of opportunity for the digital workplace. People want to work from everywhere, and that's going to present some new challenges for us to solve. Kisi has been a great partner with Meraki to solve a whole range of those challenges on the access control side and in the context of hybrid work, getting people back to the office, getting them collaborating, and doing it in a safe and secure way. This isn't going to change. There's going to be more and more ways that people are going to want to work, and when we think about enabling them at scale, it's important to consider a unified technology platform and one that you're going to be able to spin up quickly and simply. And of course, here I'm talking about the Meraki platform. So yeah, in terms of enabling those workforce experiences, that's what we're all about in the next year. That's our primary focus, because we totally anticipate that trend to continue, and that's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, and speaking of those trends, Bernhard, what are you anticipating? What do you see as next in terms of focus areas for you? What has customers' real world implementation of your technology told you and informed you about where you take this from here?
Yeah, I think other than just dynamic workplace workflows, I think that's one big theme that we have. People are like really willing to customize those using our API, connecting it with their system, where it's not an out-of-the-box connection. But on the other side, what we think a lot about is people start to, when you see the hybrid workplace, people typically still have an HQ. Maybe it needs to be a smaller one because not as many people are there. But then you start to see like smaller groups of people in the same cities. So what we expect is that a lot of companies start to decentralize because a lot of people don't want to live in the big, cities like New York anymore, where I'm at, for whatever reason, right? And there's all legitimate reasons for it. And so this decentralization of spaces is really a big theme. And then at the same time, it becomes more and more crucial that you unify the systems across all the spaces, because otherwise it's not possible to have those place-to-place experiences where you could say, hey, next week I'm actually in Miami. Can I work there for a month because I'm visiting a friend? So you can do those, like, be a better workplace by enabling those roaming around type of use cases around your facilities. And that's a big trend we are looking at. And that's also something that we see a lot from tech-enabled companies, that they want to provide a unified system across all facilities because they've seen it just creates problem if it's all separate. And yeah, I think something we haven't talked a lot about, but we think a lot about is also the channels that can help with that. So the integrators have been super high in demand for solutions they have never been needed to provide, and get asked for workplace topics and everything like that. So we're also having a huge focus on like the channel side of things, where they become basically supporters in this whole new workplace hybrid ecosystem, and are super excited about it. And that's, right, I think, something that is new too.
So if I understood you correctly, you're saying that the sort of, I mean, there's so many different terms for these folks, but essentially the resellers who supply the equipment, but also add services on top of that. This is a new area that they can add on to bolster their own offer.
And that's what resellers have been looking for a long time, is to become more value added. And all of a sudden they get asked for, how do we get in those? I mean, you guys, do the identity already. What about physical presence? And they get those questions and start researching systems like ours. And it's really exciting to be in those conversations. And that is huge opportunities for resellers and channels.
Yeah. I'm actually really curious because we were talking about these different working environments, and it's a language that we spoke a little bit before the pandemic. As you said, the whole thing with your own organization started around these flexible workspaces that people were starting to build, that were popping up here and there. What's fascinating to me now is the pandemic kind of threw everything out as all of what went before, and now we get to think more flexibly and more creatively about where we can be most productive. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to work online and potentially therefore anywhere, we have that available to us. And in fact, we've been asking ourselves that question and asking our own employees, where do you spend your working time? Is it all at home? Is it do you want to get straight back to the office as soon as you can? Do you want to spend some time in a different working environment like a coffee shop or a shared workspace? I think this is a really interesting period of history for the workforce as we sort of learn to adapt the technology to this more flexible approach. So Bernhard, just tell us where people can go and learn some more about your own organization, because I think there's been a lot of interesting stuff that we've talked about here. And of course, it really helps people to be able to then go and take the next step and see what more detail is out there.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the easiest place would be our website, getkisi.com. And that's probably a good place to start. We try our best to keep it updated with the latest information. And yeah, would love to talk anytime someone has a question or wants to talk about any of the topics covered more. Would be happy to hop on a call.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think we've done it. Thank you both very much indeed. Jordan, thank you for taking us into that introduction on experiences.
Likewise. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Bernhard. Really
pleasure.
Appreciate the time. Yep, this is what it's all about, right? It's just sharing real stories about and tying it into this bigger picture. And so we'll be back with another episode around experiences fairly soon. So look out for that as we sort of continue to explore this. And of course, if you have any reactions to the session that we've done today, if you think about your own workforce and what you're planning to do from here on and wondering how you're going to support that with technology, we'd love to hear from you, as I said. So once again, reach out to me on Twitter @Meraki Simon and let me know your thoughts. We'd love to get you involved in the podcast down the road. So do that if you can. So we'll wrap it up here. Thanks again for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, stay well, stay safe. Bye-bye for now.